Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we wander into a gentle tale penned by Jessica and brought to life in the warm voice of Simon. Our journey takes us to London, the great, bustling capital of England, a city of over 9 million souls. And that's just the humans. Birds, foxes, choats, and countless other tiny creatures fill its parks and alleyways, sharing its streets and shadows in their own quiet ways. And this story belongs to one of the smallest of them all, a little field mouse with sleek gray fur, bright dark eyes, a long squiggly tail, and a tiny nose that never stops twitching. If this bedtime adventure brings you comfort, feel free to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Now let the noise of the day drift away and follow me into the gentle nighttime corners of London, where our tiny hero waits. It is a misty London morning, the kind where the whole world seems wrapped in a soft gray scarf. The sun is only just beginning to peek over the horizon, brushing the rooftops with a shy golden glow. Beneath that pale light, Percival cracks open one curious eye, stretches his little tail with great ceremony, and sits up with a long, squeaky yawn. Percival is a very small mouse, living in a very enormous city. And that, to him, is absolute perfection. In a place as vast and busy as London, no one tells him what to do. No one decides where he must go or where he must sleep. Freedom, Percival believes, is the greatest luxury any mouse could hope for. So every night, he chooses a new place to curl up and dream. And every morning, he wakes somewhere unexpected, somewhere different, somewhere full of possibilities. Today, Percival finds himself in Hyde Park, nestled beneath the grand bronze statue of a boy. Around the statue, a circle of tiny metal fairies, rabbits, birds, and woodland creatures gather in frozen admiration, listening forever to the music of the boy's horn. Percival tilts his head, reading the engraved sign at the base. The boy is Peter Pan, a magical child who refuses to grow up and who spends his days adventuring in the faraway, fantastical world of Neverland. Percival imagines what Neverland might look like: sparkling lagoons, whispering forests, pirate ships, and skies where children soar. It sounds delightful. But then again, London is large, unpredictable, and endlessly exciting. Would he ever find the time to sail away to such a place? He's not quite sure. Percival scurries out into the park. Morning has only just begun, yet life is already in full swing. Joggers loop in neat circles around the paths. Parents push prams while chatting sleepily. Dogs of every shape and size trot about, tugging at their leads with great enthusiasm. Percival slips unnoticed among them and heads toward the Italian gardens, tucked away in a quieter corner of the park. 4 great marble fountains stand there, each one pouring and bubbling with bright, silvery water. Percival closes his eyes for a moment, letting the gentle sound wash over him. The splash, the murmur, the music of morning. Then, with a determined little nod, he chooses the splashiest fountain of all and dives in. The water sprays everywhere as he paddles happily, whiskers glistening. When he climbs out, shaking droplets from his fur, he feels fresh, clean, and ready for adventure. In a city as bustling and ever-moving as London, each day brings something new. But today is even more special. Percival has a cousin named Petunia who lives in an especially elegant mouse hole inside Buckingham Palace itself. Velvet scraps for curtains, gold foil for wallpaper, the works. And today, she has invited him for afternoon tea. At 3 o'clock sharp, Percival will need to be at the palace gates. So, at 9 in the morning, he leaves Hyde Park and dashes across the busy street to Paddington Station. Inside the arrival hall hangs a large iron clock, ticking faithfully above the crowds. He glances up. 9 o'clock. Plenty of time until tea. The real question now is, what should he do until then? His stomach gives a tiny rumbling reminder. Ah, of course. Before anything else, breakfast. London is a treasure chest of food from all around the world. Turkish kebabs, French baguettes, Ethiopian injera bread, Indian samosas. But today, Percival longs for something wonderfully, delightfully English, a Bakewell tart. A proper Bakewell tart has a crumbly, buttery crust, a thick layer of strawberry jam, a soft cushion of almond custard, and a topping of delicate, paper-thin almond flakes. Just thinking about it makes his whiskers tingle. The very best Bakewell tart in the whole city comes from a bakery in Soho. To get there, Percival slips down into Paddington's underground station, or as Londoners fondly call it, the Tube. The Tube is the oldest underground railway in the entire world. Paddington Station itself was the very first tube stop, opening all the way back in 1863. At this hour, the station is a storm of noise and movement. People in crisp suits hurry to work. Newspaper sellers wave their papers in the air, calling out the headlines. Street musicians play cheerful tunes, their cases open for coins. Children rush toward trains with backpacks bouncing behind them. A train screeches into the platform, and Percival leaps aboard. With a whoosh, the train pulls away and dives into the dark tunnel beneath London. As he waits for his stop, Percival peeks at the headlines in the paper a nearby passenger is reading. "Lovely summer's day in London," says one story. Another reads, "King to wave to crowds from Buckingham Palace balcony this afternoon." Percival's tail twitches. How exciting! He might even see the king himself later today. The train finally arrives in Soho. Percival hops off and darts straight to his favorite bakery. The moment he steps inside, he is hit by a warm cloud of scents. Flaky choux pastry, buttery scones, fresh from the oven, and, most wonderfully, the unmistakable aroma of jam and custard mingling with toasted almonds. Bakewell, tart, heavenly. Percival waits by the door as customers come and go, clutching paper bags filled with treats. A man in a pinstripe suit purchases a Bakewell tart and strolls toward nearby Soho Square. Percival follows him, quick as a shadow. The man settles on a shaded bench and takes a generous bite. Crumbs fall like tiny treasures, and Percival is right there to catch them. Delicious. Utterly delicious. Licking the last sweet traces from his whiskers, Percival wanders through Soho Square. The morning stretches before him with endless possibility. He decides he'll do a little shopping in Regent Street. A girl in a bright, flowered dress pedals her bicycle through the square, heading in exactly the direction he needs. With a nimble leap, Percival climbs onto the back wheel and slips into her satchel. The breeze ruffles his fur as the city blurs around them. Cafés, theaters, bookshops, and bright Union Jack flags waving overhead. Soon, he spots Regent Street's wide, stately curve, flanked by tall, elegant buildings. The girl stops at a red light, and Percival hops out, landing lightly on the pavement. Straight ahead is one of the oldest department stores in London, its stained glass windows shining like jewels. Inside, the store looks less like a shop and more like a castle, with an arched roof overhead and golden light streaming through the glass. Percival explores the clothing department first, weaving between racks of skirts and trousers and soft silk scarves in the china-ware section. He tiptoes across porcelain teacups and saucers, his tiny paws making musical clinks against the delicate china. In homewares, he burrows between plump cushions and velvety pillows, overwhelmed by softness. For a moment, he nearly drifts off to sleep. Perhaps he'll spend a whole night here someday, wrapped in linen luxury. Finally, he climbs the stairs to the very top floor, home to his absolute favorite part of the store: stationery. Old oak tables stretch from one end of the room to the other, each one piled high with notebooks, journals, sketch pads, and thick stacks of creamy paper. And so begins the next chapter of Percival's London adventure, with paper, ink, and endless imagination waiting right in front of him. Percival takes a long, luxurious sniff. He absolutely adores the fresh, creamy, almost buttery scent of new paper. Paper that rustles like cat's whispers and promises stories yet to be written. Around him, the shop feels like a kingdom of treasures. There are wooden cabinets polished to a shine, each one filled with dozens upon dozens of tiny drawers, so small and delicate they look as though fairies might use them. And inside every little drawer rests a beautiful fountain pen, each gleaming tip catching the light like a miniature sword. Stacked nearby in a perfect pyramid are pots of ink in every color imaginable. Percival gazes in awe at the shimmering deep blue ink, the mysterious midnight black, the mossy woodland green, the bright crimson red. Every color seems to sparkle with its own personality. Very carefully, so carefully, he nearly holds his breath, Percival dips one tiny paw into an inkwell and pads over to an empty notebook. At the very back page, he leaves a perfect, bright, purple paw print. The mark looks bold, proud, and slightly mischievous. Percival giggles to himself, imagining the surprised face of the person who eventually buys the notebook. What would they think when they find a mouse's secret signature hidden at the end? At the front counter stands a family, 2 parents and 2 eager children. The boy clutches a shiny new notebook that reflects light like a polished stone. The girl holds a pen that writes with glittering blue ink, every swirl promising sparkles. As the shop assistant wraps their purchases in crisp tissue paper, Percival strains his tiny ears. He overhears their excited chatter about their next stop, 202 B Baker Street, home of the world's most famous fictional detective, Sherlock Holmes. Percival's whiskers twitch with excitement. Sherlock Holmes. The very name sends a thrill through him. He suddenly decides that he too should pay a visit. With a burst of determination, he scurries up the counter leg, leaps skillfully into the shopping bag just as the assistant hands it to the daughter, and burrows between the soft layers of tissue paper. The family steps out of the shop, the daughter swinging the bag gently from her fingers, completely unaware of the small stowaway joining their adventure. And so, they head toward 221B Baker Street, with Percival, the field mouse, traveling right alongside them. Inside Sherlock Holmes's apartment, Percival springs out of the carrier bag and freezes in awe. It feels as though he has stepped straight back through time. The room is lined with tall shelves filled with leather-bound books whose spines glow with age and wisdom. A fire crackles in the fireplace, spreading warmth and the faint scent of smoke. On an old-fashioned roll-top desk sits an array of the tools Sherlock once used. A chemistry set with a strange liquid bubbling in a beaker over a Bunsen burner. Sheets of paper covered in complicated calculations. Encyclopedias on subjects ranging from Scottish wildflowers to deep-sea oceanography. And of course, the long-stemmed pipe Sherlock used to puff thoughtfully on while solving a case. Percival is especially enchanted by the wing-backed red velvet armchair by the fire, the very seat where Sherlock would settle himself and, with effortless calm, explain how he solved yet another baffling mystery. "Elementary, my dear Watson," Percival whispers to himself with delight. He waits until no one is looking, then hops up into the plush chair. It is wonderfully warm and soft, like sitting inside a hug. A wide yawn escapes him before he can stop it. How easy it would be to curl up here and drift to sleep. But no, he mustn't. He has an important appointment at Buckingham Palace later this very afternoon. He hasn't forgotten. Outside Baker Street, Percival pauses. He needs to know the time, yet there is no clock in sight. And being a mouse, he certainly can't tug on a passerby's trousers to ask. Luckily, he knows exactly where to find the grandest, most dependable clock in all of London. A bright red double-decker bus pulls up beside him, and Percival dashes aboard. Naturally, he races up the staircase to the top deck. Every Londoner knows that is where the best views can be found. Through the window, Percival watches the city slide past. Brick houses with chimneys rising proudly from their roofs. Oak trees, heavy with green leaves. Old churches whose stained glass windows catch the sunlight. At last, as the bus nears the River Thames, he sees it. Big Ben, the great clock tower of Westminster Palace, home of the British government. The tower is enormous, nearly 100 meters tall. A human would have to climb 334 steps to reach the top. Percival imagines how many more steps a mouse of his size would have to take. The number makes his tail curl. Outside the tower face stretches an enormous clock. 4 gleaming dials, one on each side. Inside are 5 gigantic bells. Every 60 minutes, without fail, they ring across the whole of London. Percival leans forward to see the time. It is nearly noon. The bus stops, and he hops off, weaving between feet and bags and careful steps. He arrives just in time to do one of his absolute favorite things. As the crowd gathers to hear Big Ben strike the hour, Percival presses himself against the sun-warmed stone at the base of the tower. The moment the bell clangs, a thrilling shiver runs down his spine, making his whiskers quiver. The sound is so grand and deep that it feels like the entire world breathes with it. But he cannot stay. There is still much of his beloved London to see. Whenever he comes to this side of the city, he refuses to leave without stopping by one of his favorite places, Trafalgar Square. He scurries along Parliament Street, pausing to nod respectfully at the shiny black door of 10 Downing Street. Behind that famous door lives the Prime Minister of Britain, along with his family. And Poppy, one of Percival's many field mouse cousins. Percival makes a mental note to visit her soon. He's heard that Downing Street's carpets are scattered with the most delicious crumbs from scones and sandwiches eaten during afternoon tea. Trafalgar Square is surrounded by bustling roads. Buses, cars, and taxis zoom around like colorful beetles. Percival does not dare attempt to cross on his own. Instead, he hops discreetly into the pocket of a parking inspector. Once they step safely across the road, Percival leaps out again and finds himself in the heart of the square. At its center rises a tall column called Nelson's Column, named after Horatio Nelson, one of Britain's most legendary naval captains. Around its base crouch 4 enormous copper lions with magnificent flowing manes. Percival's grandmother once shared a secret about these lions. Though they appear to be statues, they are in truth the magical guardians of London. If ever the city were in danger, she said, Big Ben would chime 13 times, and the lions would come roaring to life to protect every Londoner. Percival nods politely to the lions as he scurries past. He gives a greeting as well to the pigeons fluttering across the square, old friends in their own way, and continues on, ready for whatever his London adventure brings next. People travel from every corner of London. Families with prams, tourists with cameras, office workers on their lunch break, to gather in lively Trafalgar Square, where they toss tasty crumbs to the ever-hungry pigeons. Sometimes it's bits of sandwiches, sometimes leftover pastry, and on bold afternoons, even warm, salty fish and chips. One cheerful pigeon waddles up to Percival and offers him a rather large, delicious chip, holding it proudly in his beak as if presenting a royal gift. But Percival, polite as ever, shakes his head. He has a much grander idea in mind, one involving a proper feast. His whiskers twitch with excitement. Borough Market awaits. He trots along the pavements until he reaches the wide, glinting banks of the River Thames, the grand old river that threads its way through the very heart of London. The breeze carries a cool, fresh scent, and the afternoon sun paints warm stripes across Percival's sleek gray fur. He lifts his face to the light, letting it warm his whiskers, and sighs with contentment. It is, he decides, the perfect kind of day to take a ferry ride. With a gentle chug, 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 the ferry rumbles along the surface of the water, sending soft splashes against its sides. Percival balances on the very edge of the deck and gazes upward just as the boat glides beneath the Millennium Bridge. A gleaming, modern walkway that shines like silver in the afternoon sun. Moments later, the ferry drifts past Tower Bridge, the grand old stone giant that has guarded the river for hundreds of years. And standing right beside it, stern and ancient, is the Tower of London. Long ago, kings and queens kept prisoners there behind thick stone walls. Nowadays, Percival knows, the tower is a museum, one of the safest places in Britain, home to the dazzling crown jewels. He remembers the day he visited them, the way the gemstones sparkled brighter than raindrops on a summer window. His favorite treasure was the dazzling scepter, a tall golden wand crowned with a diamond so enormous it seemed to hold the whole sky inside it. Every British king and queen has held that very scepter during their coronations since the year 1661. The thought of those shining jewels wraps Percival in dreamy wonder all the way to the market. Borough Market bursts with color, noise, and the wonderful smells of food from all across the world. Spices drifting in the air, fresh bread, sizzling pans, and sweet fruit piled high. But Percival's destination is very specific. He races straight to McClintock's Cheesemongers, a stall overflowing with towering wheels of cheese. Mr. McClintock spots him instantly and beams. With a practiced flick, he sends a juicy cube of cheddar flying through the air. Percival catches it expertly and gobbles it down, licking the crumbs from his whiskers. Nearby, a family of tiny white mice nibble shyly on a soft rind of brie. They wave their tiny paws in greeting, and Percival waves back with enthusiasm. But he cannot linger. Not today. A quick glance at a clock tells him it is nearly 3 in the afternoon. He must reach Buckingham Palace before it's too late. Fortunately, Percival knows exactly how to get there. He darts along the curb, waits for just the right moment, and slips unnoticed onto a bright red London tour bus. Making certain no tourists spot him, he tucks himself beside the driver and peers out the enormous front window. From here, he sees everything. The grand dome of St. Paul's Cathedral rising like a pale moon. The huge Ferris wheel, known as the London Eye, turning slowly in the sky, and the cluster of shiny modern buildings sparkling at the city's center. He hears, faint but clear, an opera singer practicing a soaring aria inside the elegant marble halls of the Royal Opera House. And drifting through the open window comes the sweet perfume of roses blooming in Kensington Gardens. Then, ding, the bell rings. Next stop, Buckingham Palace. Percival hops off the bus and scurries toward the enormous square. At last, he has arrived. The giant palace sits regally behind a tall wrought iron fence, its gates decorated with golden crests. Along the fence stand narrow wooden shelters, just big enough for one person. These are the guardhouses. Inside each one stands a palace guard dressed in a bright red jacket and a tall, fuzzy black hat. Percival thinks the hats look rather funny, like enormous, furry teapots, but the guards are famously serious. He knows that even if he wiggled his ears, pulled a silly face, sang a ridiculous tune, or scampered straight up a guard's trouser leg, their expressions would remain perfectly still. As Percival begins to wonder how on earth he'll get past the guards, he hears a tiny, cheerful squeak. Through the fence, he spots Petunia, waving excitedly with her tiny pink paw. She points to a teeny mouse-sized hole hidden behind the back of a guardhouse. Percival darts toward it, squeezes through, and suddenly finds himself inside the palace gardens. Petunia rushes to greet him. The two mice hurry past neatly clipped hedges, flower beds bursting with daffodils, bluebells, and tall hollyhocks swaying in the gentle wind. A gold and marble fountain nearby sends up sparkling sprays of water that catch the light like diamonds. They slip through another secret mouse hole, and then they are inside the palace itself. Percival gasps. Buckingham Palace is more magnificent than he ever imagined. The ceilings soar high above them, carved with swirling patterns and gilded edges. The walls gleam with real gold, and grand portraits of kings and queens stare down from every direction. Before settling down for tea, Petunia insists on giving him a tour. They begin at the grand staircase, long, sweeping, and covered with a red carpet so soft Percy sinks into it with every step. He has never felt such luxurious flooring beneath his paws. They scamper through the white drawing room, where a brilliant chandelier scatters light like crushed diamonds across the walls. They hurry into a long gallery lined with pink silk wallpaper and priceless paintings framed in gold. Then they enter the throne room, where two bright red velvet thrones rest atop a platform. Feeling bold, Percival darts up one of the gilded legs and settles proudly onto the soft velvet cushion. So this is what it feels like to be royal, he thinks with a little shiver of delight. But through the throne room doorway, Percival suddenly notices a familiar shape. A distinguished gentleman with snowy white hair stands quietly nearby. He wears a neat gray flannel suit, and around his neck rests a green silk tie that catches the light. Percival glances at Petunia. She nods, eyes sparkling, as if to say, "Yes, it's really him. That is the king himself." Petunia tells Percival in a hushed, excited whisper that they ought to follow him up to the royal balcony. The king is scheduled to wave at the crowds today, she explains, and it is always quite a sight to behold. So the two little mice scamper after him, keeping close to the shadows, whiskers trembling with anticipation. When they reach the balcony, Percival sees the king from behind, tall and dignified in his embroidered coat, as he lifts his hand and waves, first to the left, then to the right, a gentle sweep of the arm that seems to float through the air. Through the iron railings, Percival can glimpse the enormous crowd below, a shimmering sea of people waving bright red and blue flags, cheering loudly enough that even a mouse can feel the vibration in his tiny paws. The balcony is incredibly high up, and from this lofty place, Percival can see so much more. The rolling green of the palace grounds, the soft, tree-lined paths of Kensington Gardens, the glittering blue ribbon of the River Thames winding through the city, and far beyond, the tall silver skyscrapers of central London shining in the afternoon sun. Percival sighs, long and content. Moments like this make him love being a London mouse more than ever. The king leans slightly toward one of his footmen and says something very softly. Percival can't catch the words exactly, but from the gentle tone and the way the king pats his own coat pocket, he suspects His Majesty is saying that it is high time for a proper cup of tea. Percival agrees wholeheartedly, and Petunia does too. With a nod and a swish of her tail, Petunia leads him back through a crack in the wall to her mouse hole, small, cozy, and very beautifully decorated for tea. A tiny thimble serves as a teacup, steam drifting from the top, and beside it sits a platter piled high with shortbread cookie crumbs arranged neatly on a scrap of lace. Percival and Petunia settle in together, sipping their piping hot tea and chattering about all their mousely adventures. They talk about the best hiding spots in the palace kitchens, the time Petunia startled a maid by tugging a sugar cube off the table, and Percival's daring escape from a cat in Hyde Park. They talk and sip tea for such a wonderfully long time that the windows outside slowly darken. The golden light of evening fades away, and at last the deep navy of night settles over London. Stars appear one by one, sparkling like distant lanterns. Percival lets out a big, mousy yawn. Petunia notices immediately and insists that he shouldn't travel home tonight. Instead, she declares, he must stay in the palace. She knows the perfect place for a mouse to sleep. Warm, safe, and softer than any nest in the whole city. She leads him down a narrow, secret corridor known only to palace mice until they come to a small wooden cupboard. Inside is a treasure trove of linen napkins, snowy tablecloths, and fluffy towels, all neatly folded and embroidered with a shimmering golden crown. Petunia explains with pride that this is the king's personal linen cupboard, used only for the finest banquets and royal occasions. Percival burrows deep into a welcoming pile of soft tablecloths, feeling them billow up around him like a cloud. He pulls a napkin over himself like a blanket, tucking it up to his chin, and wishes his cousin a very warm good night. As he settles down, he thinks that being a king must be terribly nice. Having footmen, balconies, flags, and all of London at one's feet. But as he snuggles into the snowy white linen, feeling its clean scent surround him, and hearing the distant hum of nighttime London, he can't help but think that it is terribly nice to be a London mouse too. With that thought glowing in his heart, he stretches out his tiny paws, lets his whiskers relax, closes his eyes, and drifts softly into a deep, peaceful, comfortable sleep.